What's up YouTube? It's James Quick from Learn, Build, Teach. Static sites are the new hotness, so I want to tell you 5 reasons why they rock. So I guess we'll start with really defining what static sites are. And this is kind of a modern definition of what static sites are, because things used to be a little bit different. There used to actually be a time in web development before JavaScript. Now this is before my time in web development, so I can't really speak to this too much. But there used to be a time where you didn't have JavaScript and you just got HTML pages and had CSS. And I found an article that you guys might want to check out that was kind of interesting to me. And it's on Medium, the free Codecamp account, and it's what JavaScript or what the web looks like without JavaScript. And you see on the first page that they come to, it says you basically can't access Google Maps when JavaScript is turned off because it's heavily dependent upon JavaScript. If you scroll down a little bit more, some of the key learnings here, the web is really fast without JavaScript. So if you turn off JavaScript, things load really fast because it takes time to load your JavaScript code. You don't get things like ads. You don't get things like auto-playing videos telling you to give your address. And a lot of websites just don't work at all. So this article kind of runs through and looks at a couple of different websites and what they look like, if anything, without JavaScript. So that's kind of the old definition of what static sites were. It's before JavaScript. It's just HTML and CSS. But the new definition is a tad bit different here. And so what static sites really mean today is basically that your assets, your files, your website files, your HTML, your CSS, and JavaScript are already pre-built or predefined by the time you serve your site. So if you look on the right side here for a dynamic site, a user makes a request to the server. A server will then call a database, for example, to get some data back, and then pass that data into a templating engine to then dynamically generate the HTML that gets sent back to the user, for example. So on the other side, static sites, all of that process basically has already been done beforehand. So when a user makes a request to the server, those assets just get directly sent back. So they don't have to run through any database calls. They don't have to run through a templating engine. And that's going to lead us into our very first benefit of static sites, and that is speed. So again, back to these same reasons. You don't have to run through logic on a server. You don't have to run through a templating engine. You don't have to make database calls. You just basically send back your files immediately, and this makes static sites a lot faster. Now, one of the things that a lot of people put focus on in web development in terms of improving speed, which in turn improves user experience, is the time to first byte, which is the time it takes from the initial request by the user to the time that the first byte is received by the browser. So there is little to no delay here in static sites because, again, there's no computation going on in the back end. There's no computation going on the server. It just sends a file back. So it's literally just the time that it takes to go through DNS and SSL and all that stuff and just get a file back, or the first byte of that file. So based on what we just said, the next benefit of static sites is simplicity in hosting. And that's because you don't need a server on your host. All you need is a host that can serve static files. They don't really have to do anything fancy, although some of them do. They just have to be able to return a file to the user. And because of this, you can host static sites on different hosts, and we'll talk about options for hosting in a second. You can set up this in minutes. The host that you use can cache your assets, cache your site to make it even faster. These are usually also CDNs, or content delivery networks, that are able to replicate your files across the world, so that if someone in Japan makes a call to your website, they're actually making a call to a closer server than the server in New York, for example, and the person in New York is going to call the server that is in or around New York. So you're not going to have this latency of going all across the world to retrieve back retrieve back the files for your sites. One of the biggest names in hosting static sites right now is Netlify. And Netlify really made a huge push for static sites, and they really kind of coined this term. They really coined this term Jamstack, which is a lot of what modern static sites are based on. And it's Jam is JavaScript, APIs, and markup. And this is just kind of the simplicity of how you can build sites these days. Netlify is really made for this. There's also, let's look in here, there's also There's also now hosting from Zeit or Zeet. I don't really know which one it is. This is another big popular one. Again, right here it says built-in CD, and this is the ability to replicate your files all across the world so that it's as fast as possible. Now, a couple of the other ones that are popular as well. Amazon AWS has support for static files as well, and so does the Google Cloud Platform. So you've got a couple of different options there that you guys can look at for hosting your static sites. So number 3 on the list is security. And based on the fact that you don't need a server, you don't need Node or PHP on the back end, you don't really have anything that you need to update. And fun fact, the biggest reason why sites and servers and things get hacked is that they're behind on security patches and updates. So a lot of times when there's a vulnerability, Microsoft, for example, or PHP or Node or whatever is quick enough to come out with a patch to that vulnerability before the big attacks start coming through. But it's up on you, the developer, or maybe it's something built into your provider or an IT group to make sure that those patches and updates actually get applied. So one of the biggest reasons that things get hacked is because those patches aren't applied in time before the real big push to exploit those vulnerabilities comes. So with static sites, you don't need a server on your back end. You don't have to go in and manually update languages and frameworks or your server. It's all just there, and it just returns back your files. This is the overall simplicity of your host, going back to the previous one, and a direct benefit of that is there's no big necessity. Security is key. It's simple, and you don't have to really do anything here. You are always quote unquote up to date because you don't really have to up to date anything to support your static site application. So the next piece here is developer experience, and all of these things get really tied together. The real awesome piece of developer experience here is that you usually follow a couple of different steps. Typically, you will create a site in your host. You'll set up continuous deployment, which means you're going to connect your application, your website, to source control, to a GitHub repository, for example, or GitLab or Bitbucket or something like that. Then when you push to a certain branch on your source control, the host will go ahead and automatically pull your application files. If need be, it can run a build command to go ahead and build and optimize your files if you're using a static site generator. And then your site is automatically updated and ready to go. So if you guys are interested in deploying your first, let's say, static site to Netlify, for example, and I've been big on Netlify the last couple of months, I've got a video that you guys can go and watch that's called Deploying Your First Gatsby Site to Netlify. There's very little in this video that is specific to Gatsby, so you can just as easily apply this to any other static site generator that you want. Now, keep in mind, the very first time that I used Netlify, I signed up, I created a website, and I connected it to continuous deployment and had everything live and ready to go literally within 5 minutes. And this is not just Netlify. A lot of these other hosts have very similar processes and functionality. So this is the benefit of working with static sites, is that you, the developer, you make changes, you check them into source control after setting up continuous deployment, and then you're good to go. That's really all you need to do. So to add stuff to your site, you just check it in your typical workflow, and your site gets updated just like that. So the fifth and final benefit of static sites is community support. And this is really the idea that this is getting bigger and bigger. Static sites, static site generators, Jamstack, these are terms that are really hot and popular in the web development community. I see more and more people on Twitter moving sites from WordPress, for example, to static sites. I personally just moved my site from WordPress to a static site. I've got a video on that coming out soon that you guys can check out. But with all of these people moving in that direction, there's lots of support, there's lots of options, there's lots of benefit of being a part of this community as it goes forward. So if you're interested, you can check out StaticGen, which has a list of static site generators for the Jamstack. And again, Jamstack is JavaScript, APIs, and markup. Jekyll, next Hugo, Gatsby. Those are probably four of the biggest ones. Jekyll is Ruby. Next is React and JavaScript, as well as Gatsby is React and JavaScript. Hugo is the Go language, and you can just come through here and see how many different static site generators there are. Now, some people look at this as a downside because it's overwhelming with so many options, but I take this as a benefit because I can come with my background in React or Angular or Vue or just JavaScript in general, or Go or something else and apply that to a static site, and they take care of the bundling and the optimization and the build and usually live reloading servers and things like that. So there's lots of different options here for static site generators. As we saw before, there's lots of different options for hosting your static sites. Netlify being my favorite most recently, as I've started to dig in and do some stuff there. I've greatly enjoyed it. So I want to leave you guys with some final thoughts. I just want to let you know that things aren't all positive, right? There are some things to consider when you look at static sites. And part of that is the dependency potentially on the third party for back-end functionality. So typically you'll write your server and your front end, and you'll kind of have those tied together in some way and deploy them together. Static sites are just front end code that you deploy, and you'll need some sort of functionality on the back end at times, depending on your site, to handle things like subscribes to newsletter or just form posts or things like that. So you have to find some solution to that. Another thing to consider here is every time you add content to your site, you need to do a build. Now, based on the developer experience, a build is very, very simple. There's not much to it. It's very easy. But every time you add new content, you will need to do a build versus you could simply add something to a database and have that be dynamically picked up in a dynamic site. So those are a couple of things to just keep in mind as you look towards static sites. But overall, depending on the scenario, static sites seem awesome. They have been awesome for the things that I've done. I've just recently gone through, like I said, a conversion of WordPress to static sites. I will add a video, or I will be creating a video that I will link here when it's ready so that you guys can check that out as well. So that's going to wrap up this video. I'm curious what you guys are working on. Are you using static sites? What hosts are you using? How has your experience been? Leave a comment in the comments below. Find me on Twitter at JamesQQuick. Reach out, communicate, talk to me. Let me know how you guys are doing, what you're doing, and how that's working. Thanks for watching. I'll check you guys out in the next video. Hey guys, if you enjoyed the video, leave a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and you can check out my newsletter on learnbuildteach.com to get updates on the latest content as it comes out. Thanks for watching.